The information presented in this series of tapes is not medical advice and is not given as medical advice, nor is it intended to propose or offer to propose a cure for any disease or condition. Before starting any medical treatment, please consult your physician.
Hello, I'm Jay Kordich. I want to introduce you to my tapes, my series of tapes. I've put in 40 years of working in the trenches to people, and I want to give you all my experiences and let you know all about these juices and these raw foods and how to build a healthy, sound body so you don't degenerate prematurely. We're only on this earth for such a short time, and if you follow, I believe, what we're teaching, I think you will have the ultimate source of food value reaching every single one of your 60 trillion cells. And you'll find that the basis, the nucleus to being healthy is the partaking in freshly made juices that you make with your own juice machine in your own kitchen. It's my total belief, and there isn't any other way to be healthy into your 70s, 80s, 90s, and even beyond, and disease-free. I'd like to read something to you that's from the National Cancer Institute, and what they tell us is, quote, "The American diet is lousy, and Americans are dying because of it." And then our former Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, he tells us better than 1 million Americans die every year because of faulty food intake. Now that's the way I'd like to start this off. And I'd like to explain to you the difference between juices and eating the food. Now, there was a very famous scientist. In fact, he wrote one of the first textbooks ever written about raw food and juices. It's called The Chemistry of Food and Nutrition, and he himself was Professor Emeritus of Columbia University in Manhattan. And the book's title, The Chemistry of Food and Nutrition. And he is widely quoted by medical men and nutritionists, and who's perhaps the world's greatest authority on the vital subject of foods. And that's Dr. Henry C. Sherman. And he says, quote, "When nutritional knowledge is sufficiently widespread, people will consume up to 3 pounds of green and yellow vegetables and fruits daily." And then he adds in great big bold print, "The more, the better." Now he continues, "Why should we get our vitamins and minerals from raw vegetables and fruits in preference to any other way? Because the enzymes are produced by the glands from food elements, and good health is impossible when the enzyme-producing glands atrophy. Heed this important fact. The elements from which enzymes are produced are destroyed at 126 degrees Fahrenheit. You need much live raw food daily in order to supply the glands with a reserve of these essential vital elements." Now he says, why use juices? Why not just eat the raw vegetables? As we have indicated in the previous chapter, for optimal health, you need far more than you could possibly eat. The stomach just couldn't handle that much bulk. Then, too, if modern research is correct, the power to break down the cellular structure of raw vegetables and assimilate the precious elements they contain, even in the healthiest individual, is only fractional, not more than 35%, and the less healthy down to 1%. Now the typical person, the typical adult, absorbs 10% or less of the food value from the food they eat in the form of fruits and vegetables. In the form of juice, these same individuals, people that assimilate down to less than 1%, assimilate up to 92% of the elements. He continues and says this, "The juice of the plant, like the blood of the body, contains all the elements that build and nourish. It is a well-known fact that all foods must become liquid before they can be assimilated." Now, he continues too, "It is also an established fact that many of the elements of the plant can be obtained by eating the animal that lives on the plant. That is, if we eat the glandular part of the animal in which these precious food elements are stored, But as you can readily see, that method is getting our minerals and vitamins and enzymes second hand. Why not eat the plant that builds the body structure of the animal? Raw fruit and vegetable juices enable us to do just that. And we get our vital elements in their entirety, unchanged and unspoiled by cooking. Now, do you get the gist of that? He's telling us right now that when you eat cooked food, you have altered the molecular and anatomical structure of the food. Now, a lot of people, I've got to tell you, these are my experiences. A lot of people, when they begin to jump on the bandwagon of juices, they have to be a little bit patient. It takes time. It takes time to resurrect and flush and cleanse and detoxify. In fact, some people, when they first begin to make these juices, what happens, and consume them, what happens is they have various amount of reactions. Some people get quite nauseous, almost like a seasick feeling. Other people have gastritis from it. Other people have diarrhea from it. And these are the reactions that happen as they're starting to cleanse and detoxify, you see. Now, a lot of people also say, well, gee, if these juices are so important, why not buy them? I can buy them pre-made. Now, just remember this. Everything in a can or a bottle that you buy from a supermarket or even a health store that's canned or bottled is sterile. It's a federal law that everything in a can or a bottle sold retail to the public must be put through a sterilizer, or if you will, a pasteurizing machine, you see. And the temperature of these machines is set to play safe, to kill the enzymes, at 175 degrees Fahrenheit. And the time allotment is a minimal time of 20 minutes, but most machine conveyor belts are set for a half an hour. Now, the reason they do that is to kill the enzymes, to give these canned and bottled goods shelf life. You see, so when you're making juices, just the oxidation will destroy and alter the nutritional content very, very quickly. For instance, as we get into other tapes, you're going to find out, and we'll stipulate this, we'll even emphasize it. When I worked at Stanford University and was making this cabbage juice for a lot of the patients with Dr. Garnett Cheney, and we were treating the people with ulcers with cabbage juice, we found out within 1 minute after you juice the head of a cabbage, the medicinal therapeutical quality, the amino acid called glutamine, which they label as vitamin U, dissipates and disappears. So it must be freshly made and consumed immediately. You cannot let these juices be stored. Now, a lot of people, one of the questions, of course, I said early on, is a lot of people will eat these foods all their lives and think they're going to be healthy. Now, I'm not saying to you to eliminate all fiber. That's impossible. Fiber is an absolute essential. Don't misconstrue what we're saying here. Fiber helps you exercise the gums. It helps you salivate. It stimulates the peristaltic action. And it helps cleanse the colon out. It's not so much the fiber that's important. It's the juice that is locked in that fiber that has to be released. And my slogan for over 40 years now has been, it's the juice of the fiber that feeds you. The fiber is desperately needed, and it helps clean out the colon from excess bacteria. But not a speck of fiber, not a fiber that's thinner than the finest hair on your head, can permeate through the intestinal wall and get into the bloodstream to feed you. It's the juice that was locked in that fiber that, through osmosis, penetrates through the intestinal wall into the liver to reach the bloodstream, to reach every one of your 60 trillion cells. Now, a lot of you folks will, like I said, buy canned goods again. I want you to be your own cannery. And it isn't so bad that they just sterilized it. I have to emphasize this. They put things in like sodium benzoate, benzoic acid, nitrates, nitrites, butylated hydrocarbons, BHA, BHT, and they even treat the metal part of that can with chemicals so the can metal will not rust in that juice solution. Most people go about merrily on their way, and they're still alive, they're still kicking, they're still reading a newspaper, watching television, going to work, driving a car, sleeping, waking up, brushing their teeth, not realizing what they're doing and how they abuse the body. A human body can be abused for about 20 to 30 years, and then you have to pay. You have to pay the piper, so to speak. The key to me is keeping live food in the body. Now, what are live foods? Well, live foods can be pinpointed as foods that have enzymes. Now, what are enzymes? They're little fatty protein chemical molecules. And what they do in actuality is speed up or slow down or neutralize every reaction upon reaction of the human body. Now, enzymes are very delicate, and only heat destroys them. Freezing does not destroy them. And they're so delicate that they begin to be destroyed at 102 degrees Fahrenheit. And as I read out of Sherman's book to you earlier, they are totally destroyed by the time they reach 126 degrees Fahrenheit. And what happens when you have dead food in your body, which is enzymeless food, or, if you will, cooked food? Now you put a burden on perhaps the second most important organ of the body, and that is the pancreas. The body now has to produce enzymes that were originally in the raw food. Now, there are no enzymes to stimulate the digestive processes and initiate it. So the organ, the pancreas, has to come into action and into the foray to produce enzymes, burdening it with yet another job. The pancreas is supposed to produce insulin and produce pancreatic enzymes to keep trophoblast or cancer cells at bay. And there's a very famous doctor that's put over 40 years of his life into research on enzymology. And what Dr. Howell found was, after years of eating cooked food, the pancreas swells up to 3.5 to 4 times its normal size and atrophies, and finally ends up not being capable of doing the job it is supposed to do, having it burdened with this other job, and it's pulling other organs into the body, particularly the thymus gland, which is one of your glands that produces T cells to fight so many viruses and conditions of diseases in the body. So the pancreas begins to atrophy, you begin to age, everything starts to, like the domino system, fade away and break down, and you have a degenerative disease. In fact, what they talk about, I'm talking about some of these medical people that believe in holistic and natural things rather than in chemical things. They're starting to say there's no such thing as a degenerative disease. There's only toxemia. But what really does you in is not even, see, toxemia is still just a symptom. What really does us in prematurely and ages us very, very quickly is one thing: cooked food. And that's what Dr. Howell says. Cooked food beats down the human body, because anything cooked is dead, and you cannot revitalize the human body with something that's dead. Dead food, dead bodies. Live food, live bodies or cells or tissues. Now, I'm a raw foodist, but eating raw live food is not enough. Now, I want to tell you the difference between eating and juicing. When you eat the raw food, you should chew every mouthful of food a minimum, as Dr. Fletcher said, a minimum of 50 times. Now, most of us won't do that. It's boring. It's time-consuming. And like my good friend Dr. Lyndon Smith, the pediatrician, he says, ease off on the people. We're never going to get people to chew their food that long. So what we like you to do is chew every mouthful of vegetation at least 20 times every mouthful before it's swallowed. And the reason for chewing is not to break the particles down into minute pieces. The reason for chewing is to mix your saliva properly with the food that you're eating, with the vegetation, which is cellulose fiber. Basically, it's lignum, it's woody substances. And basically, if you remember your science classes, cellulose fiber is indigestible to man. Now, the reason we want you to chew is to mix that salivary amylase, which is called ptyalin, P-T-Y-L-I-N, and that's manufactured in your salivary glands alongside your jaw, and under your tongue. And that's the reason for chewing so many times every mouthful, is to thoroughly mix that saliva, that ptyalin, which is an amylase, so that The body then, with that mixture, can break the carbohydrates down to starches and sugars. You see, that's the key to good digestion with vegetation, and you'll get an optimum amount of food value, 10%. People that don't chew adequately, they're down to the 1 to 2% syndrome. Now, when you're eating vegetables, it takes about an hour and a half for that vegetable to be broken down and utilized before it starts to move out of the stomach through the pyloric valve in spurts. When you're doing fruit, it moves out within 20 minutes. So don't put fruit and vegetables together because they clash enzymatically. They'll cause a lot of gastritis. What happens now is you will have a rancid effect that can play havoc to the lower bowels and the colon. The reason for juicing is to separate the juice from the fiber so that when you do drink pulp-free juice, it's in your bloodstream in a matter of minutes. When you eat the food, then the body has to process it. And all the body is doing, chewed adequately enough, at least 20 to 30 bites every mouthful of vegetation. Now the body has to, with peristaltic action, break everything down. And believe it or not, when your body is digesting food, your body is nothing more or less than a juice extractor. The whole premise behind digestion is to separate the juice from the fiber. And I'll bet you that no one's ever mentioned that to you before. Now, when all of that chime, it's a bolus. It's all the juice and the enzymes and the hydrochloric acid and the gray-green pussy bile, splitting the fatty atoms and the intestinal juices. When it all reaches the third part of the small intestine, where you have your villi, it is only the juice that permeates through the villi, through the portal vein into your liver, to reach your bloodstream. The fiber moves a little further down to the ileocecal canal valve, to the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, and out the rectum in a bowel movement. See, it's the juice of the fiber that feeds you. When you first begin on the juice program, you beginners especially, what I want you to do is chew your juice, especially the first mouthful and perhaps even the second mouthful. And by chewing your juice, I mean to put a mouthful of juice and swig it around, swish it around for 20 to 30 seconds. And what that will do, that will stimulate the taste buds and the salivary glands to produce and start to secrete the enzyme ptyalin that will very readily begin the breakdown of the carbohydrates into simple sugars and starches. So I think that's imperative, the first mouthful and maybe even the second mouthful. Chew your juice. You see the power of raw juices and raw plant life? The only thing you have to remember, and the only challenge that's facing you, is knowing how to extract these elements so you can obtain 100% of the food values, the known factors and the yet unidentified factors of natural foods.
This concludes Side 1 in Introduction to Juicing.